We are inherently wired for well-being. We all hold the keys to greater happiness, ease, and connection in our lives. However, we are not taught how to access these capacities. Welcome to Wired for Wellbeing, where we explore how understanding your nervous system can transform the way you live, love, and relate. Because when you work with your nervous system instead of against it, life opens up with more compassion, freedom, and ease. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Rutstein, a practicing clinical psychologist for the last 40 plus years, and I'm joined by my good friend and producer, Steve Lessard. Steve, say hi.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Jeffrey.
Hey, glad you're here. Each week, we use real questions from listeners like you as doorways to explore how we each can work with our nervous system. Because while our stories differ, all our nervous systems speak a shared language. In today's episode, we'll look at the ways our nervous system can lead us to read or misread a situation and how that can help us feel stuck. We'll also explore how to respond when we find ourselves asking, what's wrong with me? So let's dive in. Steve, what do you have for us this week?
Jeffrey, our first question today looks at the signals we send as well as the signals we receive and how those may be landing with another person and how they may actually affect what we think is going on. So let's take a listen to Emma's question.
Great.
My name is Emma, and I had a question regarding like the neuroception and nervous system safety and the micro expressions that our leaky faces give off and that other people perceive and unconsciously affects their behavior. I recently had a friendship end in a really harmful way, and I was kind of using neuroception as a way to find meaning and closure in that, oh, maybe I did something wrong with my leaky face, or I maybe signaled symptoms of disgust or dysregulation or something that they picked up on and viewed me as unsafe. The friend ended it in a really mean way, didn't have anything valid or points of something that I had done other than just saying that she felt unsafe energetically around me and couldn't look me in the eyes without needing to blink a lot. And I was, of course, like, oh my gosh, I don't want to cause harm. And then just thinking about looking back what I had done, which was overextending myself to be helpful to this person. And so maybe she was picking up on that. And then, I'm just trying to make sense of it, of someone that I put a lot into the friendship and tried to be there and be supportive for. And it just turned out that it all got turned around and flipped on me. And just wanted to see what your thoughts were about sometimes using the neuroscience and the neuroception to kind of reaffirm harmful habits of me overlooking my discomfort, overextending myself, associating close relationships with discomfort, and just needing to push through and be better and be helpful and good and kind enough that eventually everything will be okay. And it's just proving like, no, that's actually not the case. Anyway, thank you for listening. Bye.
Wow. Emma, that's a big and important, very full question there. So in answering this, I also want to break a few terms down that you used. You obviously have done some reading or work with understanding the nervous system. And so you're aware of neuroception, which I've defined before, but I'll do it again here. That's the capacity of our nervous system to read the state of the situation around us in the environment, in other people, and in relationships between us and other people. Our nervous system, through neuroception, picks up safety or danger. Now, our neuroception can work in two ways. It can either work as called matched or mismatched. When it's matched, my nervous system is perceiving danger and danger is actually there. Or my nervous system is perceiving safety and the environment or person is actually safe. That's matched neuroception. Mismatched neuroception is when my nervous system is telling me that this is terribly dangerous when in fact the environment is safe. Or I'm seeing someone as totally safe through my nervous system, but in reality, they're dangerous. That's called mismatched neuroception, and that occurs when we are often taking events or experiences that our nervous system has learned to predict from our past and using them as a template to react in the present moment. So sometimes our neuroception is just about the present moment. Sometimes it's very much mixed with not the present moment, but with mismatched neuroception, sort of overlaying the two and kind of confusing our sense of safety or danger in this moment. So that's the quality of neuroception. Um, you're also talking about the ability to be mindfully aware of your own nervous system. Like you did some thinking initially, right? And you noticed several things with your friend. The number one, you felt hurt by the way that she ended the relationship or broke off the connection. And then you started seeing that part of the hurt was because you had invested so much in the relationship, as is and was your nervous system habit. In other words, you revealed later in the question that overextending yourself could be a habit. You overlooking your discomfort or somehow believing in yourself that good relationships or close relationships are often meshed with um, difficulty or discomfort. So those are great understanding of your own nervous system biases that you tended not to listen to when you might feel like you're overextending yourself, because a belief for your nervous system to feel safe is people, and I'm making this up here, but this is often kind of true. People will only like me if I'm nice or a thoughtful friend or a supportive friend or a caretaking friend. And often we may find that those efforts are being received by someone who kind of expects to be taken care of or expects you to minimize some of your needs. And this kind of imbalance in relationship is especially notable for people who've had either some adverse experiences growing up, being raised by a narcissistic parent, or trauma and abuse, uh, and or natural disaster trauma. Any kind of significant trauma can amplify all of these very human tendencies to want to maintain relationships at some expense to ourselves. And the more that we're disconnected from our own body, the less that we listen to the very signals that can let us know we're upset because we muscle through them. And even that's, you talk about that in a brilliant way. I love your phrase, our leaky faces. That's a great phrase. I'm going to have to use that. You're talking about the way that we transmit our inner state, whether we're in fight or flight, high energy, or whether we're kind of, pulled back and a little depressed or spacey or not interested in connecting, or we're in a state of regulation where we're actually most capable of relating and connecting and feeling affection, feeling compassion. So there is this way of us being drawn into relationships and then acting out old patterns that our nervous system is still playing out because it believes it's safe. Even if our head, our minds are telling us, you don't have to do this to be liked, our nervous system may keep driving us in this way. So, number one, I'm really sorry about how the friend ended this relationship. That's hurtful. And I'm also really impressed And I think it's important for you to kind of honor, recognize that you had the wherewithal to begin to look at what are the parts of this hurt, right? And one of the parts is how much you invested. You really were trying and giving, perhaps over giving, overextending yourself. And then this woman turns it all around, like you said. And now you're the predator. You're the one who wants everything. You're the one who's not safe. And you've been trying to do your best to be safe and to put your needs out of the way and to basically try to answer whatever needs you could in the relationship. I also appreciate your honesty in wanting to wonder, did I did I contribute to this? Right? So yes, like you noticed, we absolutely can contribute by the way, if someone notices the tone in our voice, our facial expressions, the way we're holding our body, whether we're open to them or turning away from them, whether we can have eye contact or we can't. All of these things, you know, our states influence other people's states. But that also uh, doesn't take into account the other person can misread your signals. So there's a chance they could see you instead of being friendly and caring as someone who secretly is wanting something else from them. I mean, we could make up any story, but we don't really know how they're perceiving you and thinking about you. We know only that it doesn't feel comfortable for her. That's the only thing that she said. She's trying to blame you for it. And a very telling thing here, too, is that she can't look at you. So let me pause here for a second and say, anytime that someone gives us devastating feedback that is not very specific, it often tells us a tremendous amount about their nervous system rather than it pronouncing our nervous system as bad, especially if they're shaming or blaming you. There's something very dangerous and wrong about you energetically, right? So there's often a sense that that's very salient for her nervous system, that there's something about eye contact or closeness, and also how she handles conflict by not really looking at her part of it, by making it kind of all about you. So, in the realm of possibilities, absolutely, some of your frustration could have been perceived by her, but we don't know what that means. I mean, for some people, if they perceive frustration in someone else, oh, okay, you're frustrated. Is there anything I can do? Someone else might feel insulted, mm, shamed, demeaned in some way if they feel like someone's getting angry with them or irritated. And I'm understanding it was your leaky face, not your leaky mouth, that said anything. It was maybe little micro expressions that you gave her about not feeling fully happy or warm about things. So you may have a role in this. But by the way, I'm kind of glad that you're also understanding that your nervous system is going to communicate truth to a certain extent, right? Like what was leaking through to her, if anything was most likely the stuff you were feeling but not feeling comfortable showing and expressing. So again, it's information, something for else for you to work with versus confirmation that you're bad. Even her being upset and doing it in a hurtful way, that tells you a lot about her nervous system because we could end contact with someone, but we don't have to be mean to them in the process. We don't have to make them feel worse for saying, I don't feel comfortable, or we've been drifting away, or all we do is argue. I think we should take some space. There's a different way of ending or making a boundary versus making someone feel really bad and really wrong. So I think that you're doing great tuning into, right, what's happening with you in reaction to this relationship, both in your being the friend over the past months or years and now being the rejected friend. All of this is part of a same piece. But one of the most positive ways you can relate to this is by seeing what can I learn here that would be helpful for me going forward? And the one thing I'll suggest is that you may want to pay more attention to what happens to your nervous system when you're in relationship. As I've mentioned this before, when I was younger, I didn't feel very good about myself, and I would want to do anything to, get someone else to like me as a friend. So I would just be agreeable, as agreeable as I possibly could be, and not really show any of my own needs or where I differed, but whatever my friend wanted to do was fine. And I thought that that was a great way to make friends. It's not. It's a great way to have people who want to do what they want to do all the time and have company, but it's not really a great way to have a mutual, reciprocal relationship. So this is again a nervous system habit that you have, and many of us have when we move into relationships. Instead of being ourselves, we sometimes try to be what we think the other person expects or needs or wants. And so the invitation here, Emma, is to, in each relationship, friend, coworker, stranger, neighbor, cashier, to see whether you can enter into connection without also going into some dysregulation. There's a little bit of flight energy in this because we're scanning for what the other person wants and we're feeling driven to give because we feel that that's what's needed. It's not safe not to give. We won't like how we feel about ourselves. We won't like how the other person feels about us. So we feel like we're compelled to give. So going forward, this is a way to begin to look at how your nervous system shows up in relationships. In what places and ways are you free to be you? Not overextend yourself, being generous when you want to be generous, but also knowing that when you've come to the end of that generousness of time or money or whatever, that you feel okay allowing yourself not to be generous and to receive. So this is, I'm so glad you shared this because this is such a wonderfully pointed question. And so many of us have relationships that have conflict. And sometimes they end, and then we're left with nursing a wound for a while. And it really helps to begin to understand because our nervous systems will often make us take blame because that helps the nervous system feel more in control is by thinking it's responsible for something. Because if I'm responsible for this, I can change this and make this not happen. But there's a different way of being with it, which is to understand what the nervous system is trying to tell you and then working with it. Like, for example, maybe being sensitive to the earlier signals of feeling overextended, of feeling like you're overlooking your discomfort, or that you're expecting that, well, struggle or stress or discomfort is just part of a close relationship. Begin to see when that just begins to emerge. The more attention you pay to that, the more that you will be empowered to see what's going on when it's going on and make a decision. Well, I'm really feeling frustrated. Let me either see if I can help us move to a more balanced and equal relationship, or let me pull back from giving quite as much so I feel a little more balanced. Or maybe I have to renegotiate and end the relationship. But if we're so busy being driven by a nervous system habit or program that we're just extending ourselves, we don't really take the time to notice how's this landing in me? How am I feeling? Is this working for me? So I'm so glad that you're having these insights. And I would love to hear back from you a few months down the road and let me know how things go and how your awareness is in helping you see where you are in the moment to moment flow of relationship.
Jeffrey, your phrase information, not confirmation, really affected me actually, because I see in Emma a potential pattern in myself. And maybe I'm expanding Emma's story a little bit, but that tendency to believe what others say about us, that confirmation, that false belief that, oh, well, they must know and I must not be good at this, or they must be better at me at this, or they must see something in me that I don't see. instead of that information of, wait, there's something going on here. And then it leads me to ask questions in my life of like, and you've talked about this, is this mine or is this not mine? Is this something that I can take on here? Is this something that the other person is bringing to the relationship?
I think that that's a great point, right? I think that one of the liberating pieces of a nervous system perspective is, instead of ownership of everything, which we do if we believe we're a intact psychological being, and so I should be on top of whenever I get dysregulated. I should never get mad without cause. I should never get sad without cause. I should never get anxious without cause. Or if I do, I should hide them and not express them. That's unrealistic. And that puts a tremendous amount of blame on the individual, on me, on you, on each person. A nervous system perspective is liberating because it's not about pathology. It's not about something being wrong or broken or mm, just damaged. It's a sign that your nervous system has learned particular habits. And the basic habits that are most interfering for most people is when we have strong periods of dysregulation. Dysregulation is going into any of the defensive states: fight, anger, flight, fear, shutdown, collapse. That's that numb, tired, spacey, going down to blue, depressed, dissociative, playing dead. We have a big, wide range that our nervous systems can move in and out of. Right? So if we can begin to look at, gee, where am I going? What am I feeling as information? We get curious. If I receive it as confirmation, I'm not curious. Oh, this just shows I'm a piece of crap. This just shows no one's going to love me. This just shows I'm not a good friend. She can't look at me. I am such a horrible person. So our nervous system perspective begins to see how we may have unintentionally contributed to a conflict, how the other person may be unconsciously responding to our cues, and how this can get played out. It gives us much more space for compassion and begins to allow ourselves to look at, like, I remember when I was younger and maybe someone and I would get into a fight, but like a really big fight, not fists, but just really angry and shouting and upset with the other. But back then, if anyone said anything with an angry tone to me, it both made my nervous system kind of contract and get afraid. But I started feeling in those moments that when someone says something with the force of anger, it feels true. Or maybe closer, I would be terrified of thinking that this was true. I would be terrified of them being right about me, that I am such a shameful or worthless or broken person. Moving towards a nervous system perspective really helps disentangle that more and more, and helps us see through the eyes of compassion and clarity instead of through the state that our nervous system has pushed us into. How does that land, Steve?
Well, again, it's something we've talked about, that it allows that degree of freedom and ease. And I've talked about it as like feeling a weight off of my shoulders, that I don't have to be responsible and hold on to all of the things that I need to hold on to. So yet again, this work is pointing to the liberation and freedom and ease that can come from it.
Exactly.
I want to move us into our second question, because at its core, I think it's a question that a lot of people have. I'm really grateful that this question has come in and we can start unpacking this. And again, it's a common question. I think it's a question that I've had in my life. It's a question I've heard other people echo. This question came in from an anonymous writer. He asked that we not use his name. So we'll treat this one as anonymous as requested. And I'm going to read it to you here. Hi, Jeffrey. I'm a childhood abuse trauma survivor who has been in therapy for several years. My question is this: if I already know of a trauma memory, meaning that I have an understanding of what happened and the context of the memory, Why does it keep intruding into my awareness and casting a cloud of dark, foreboding, and despair? Why is it continuing to hold me hostage and dominate parts of most days? What do I need to do to help this stop happening? What am I missing?
Hmm. Oh man. Well, dear writer, I'm sorry for the abuse that you experienced, and I'm also sorry that you're dealing with the really painful legacy of trauma, which is that many things can imprint in our nervous system, but trauma reliably and continually does. It is a force to be reckoned with, or sometimes a force that feels beyond reckoning with. So there is a difference, right, between knowing, and I know that you used that word in the question, knowing of a memory, right? Knowing its context and what happened. Those are also the essential pieces. What I have found in my own experience about why, well, let me back up. For those who aren't familiar with the way that traumatic memory can work, um, traumatic memory versus normal narrative memory of like what you had for breakfast today finds a way to intrude. So it can all of a sudden be an emotional storm where you just feel sad and despairing and overwhelmed, or it can be a somatic bodily storm where you feel pain in certain regions of the body, or you feel numb throughout the body. Um, it can be nightmares. It could be many things, but the nervous system of someone who's traumatized is more reliably dysregulated, takes less to dysregulate it, stays dysregulated longer. And also, uh, traumatic pieces of the puzzle, memories, feelings, behaviors, knowledge, often find their way into consciousness by kind of popping in. Often at the beginning, we don't even know what to make of them. So it seems like you've done a lot to decode uh, this memory in terms of the being able to narrate what happened. But there is a big difference for the nervous system from being able to narrate what happened versus to know the impact, to know how this event has taken up residence in your nervous system, to know, oh, that's why I'm always afraid of meeting strangers, or that's why I can never be late with an assignment, or that's why I can never spend money, or that's why I don't want anyone to take a photo of me. We find these things just coming up, but we don't make a connection to how and why the memory is inserting itself into this moment again. So it usually says that either the impact, the cost to you, hasn't been really felt and integrated yet. And I don't mean drowning in it, but we can get an intellectual sense, a narrative of the trauma, but we may still be keeping ourselves very separate from the pain or the fear or the doubt or the shame in terms of connecting it with the trauma. But, and here's the thing, but we'll always be flooded with fear and shame and pain and sleep disturbances, all of that. It just won't be consciously connected to this is the impact of the trauma. So it's not, I think that this is showing you by these pieces still coming in and intruding into your days that there's something else that needs to be recognized or felt or integrated with this particular memory or part of a memory. And again, um, your feeling states, right, are very, very important to attune to. right? Because that's going to be information. By the way, if you're currently in therapy, right, I would also, of course, this should go without saying, run this by your therapist, because they'll be closest to working with you where you are in your work, and what, if anything, they might observe might be holding you back a little bit. If you're not in therapy right now and you're finding that your exploration of this is still leaving you kind of flat or not getting to any kind of resolution, you may want to consider working with someone about this, who's a trauma therapist in particular, because this is a part that really can move from continuing to intrude and dominate your days to something that can be less and less and less part of your daily experience, eventually to where it's really a rare occurrence for you to feel these things. But that happens as we work more and more deeply with how the memory and the belief about what we learned from the memory still holds. So, for example, a lot of people have shame about their trauma and they work through the trauma, but they don't work through the shame of the trauma. And so the trauma that's not been processed because we haven't really been able to work through, decharge the shame, keeps finding a way to push something up and into awareness. So there's something about turning towards the body, turning towards emotions as this is coming up, and to notice, why is this coming up right now? Right? Is it the time of day? Is it the person you just spoke to? Is it some thoughts you were having about yourself, critical or judgmental, that were occurring right before you started going back into this loop? Again, they start pointing a trail of what's happening in the nervous system. But basically, right, good for you for doing the work you're already doing. And absolutely positively, you can work this through in a way on your own or with help that will help this become less and less and less of part of your regular experience. Eventually, it will hardly show up at all.
I was drawn that in our first call, we talked about information and confirmation. And in this question, you talked about the narrative of what's happening and knowing its impacts. And I think I'm trying to see if there's a connection between that information, confirmation, as well as the narrative of what's going on in our trauma and its impacts that point to another system.
Yes, so I could make up with that was very clear with our first caller was about is the friend confirming her badness, or is this information about her and her friend that may have nothing to do with Emma's badness? In this uh, writer's question, there is also a sense, at least for me, what do I need to do to help this stop happening? And what am I missing? Were two pieces of his question. And the what am I missing is an honest question, but it also is sort of pointing to, what am I doing wrong? I know I must be doing something wrong if this is still happening. And that's where he's taking this data as confirmation that he's doing something wrong. Instead of, this is information that the memories are still calling for some kind attention. They're still calling for him to lean into understanding them, not drowning in them, not getting re traumatized, but leaning into what this would have meant for him when he was a boy. How does that still travel with him? That feeling of insecurity or doubt or worthlessness or fragility or feeling less than. These are all things about how the memory and the trauma keep rolling forward, but often without our conscious awareness. So when a writer says, what am I missing? And he leans into the, it's, I'm not doing this well enough. We could offer the same piece, which is that to really and truly hear this as information, it's information that the nervous system still needs some kind of attention. or rather this memory, and the hook, why it keeps landing and reoccurring, needs some leaning into.
So powerful, that lens of, and it's like a default lens of seeing, starting from what's wrong with me or what am I doing wrong. And then through this work, beginning to learn how to see through some of that and start to get at maybe a little bit more truth of what's happening.
Yes, yes, exactly. Exactly. That's to me one of the big pieces of power embedded within a nervous system perspective, is that it gives us clarity to both understand ourselves and other people, and also a way not to take things so personally. Someone would be acting like a jerk, not because of you, but because they're in pain, they're dysregulated, they're overwhelmed, or they think that they have to try harder to get attention, whatever it is, right? It gives us a way of understanding our pain and other people's pain, our way of trying to find safety. Everyone is trying to find safety, and everyone is also looking for connection. No one wants to be disconnected, to be lonely or abandoned. So our nervous systems are seeking safety, and safety in safe connections. So, how we make a connection safe can depend a bit on our past, right? And now we're also talking about relationships, right? One level of relationship is how we relate to our friends, like Emma. And the writer of our second question, it's the relationship to his own experience. And that's also what can be just as dysregulating for many of us, is reacting to our own thoughts and judgments, right? That can be just as triggering as something outside of us.
I think it's insidious that so many of us don't see the importance of the relationship to ourselves. When you were sharing that, I was like, oh, yeah, that is another relationship, and one that sometimes I screw up. And I'm so worried about screwing up those relationships with other people that I take on false stories, or I take on their false beliefs, or I take on the, I want to be a good person and maybe I made a misstep here. And I see how I do that with myself. You know, it's such a common and, again, insidious is the word that comes up here. Jeffrey, what can we start to pull together in our calls today, in our written in call and our voicemail today?
Well, I think that again, both callers are really working with a nervous system perspective, and they're looking for some deeper understanding about how to use these tools, or what mm, could help them make mm, a sense of feeling better, uh, feeling not so hurt and not so stuck or overwhelmed by the friends breaking up or ending the friendship. And also how to not take the continual reoccurrence of a intrusive memory as your fault. Both of these are about looking at how can we see through the lens of a nervous system, allowing us to see things clearly, right? I'm reminded of this, one of my favorite quotes by Anais Nin. We don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. So if I'm in a defensive state, I do not see the world or other people or me as things actually are. I see them through the lens of a defensive state. If I am in regulation, if I'm in a more balanced, my window of tolerance, I'm able to think and feel at the same time, I'm not hijacked by something, I have much more latitude for connection, for openness, for seeing things as they really are, because I'm not in a distracted defensive state. But once we're in a defensive state, high energy or low energy, it begins to both impact our physiology, but literally impacts the way that we look at other people. All of a sudden, if I'm angry, other people are potential adversaries. If I'm afraid, they're potential perpetrators. And if I'm in shutdown and collapse, the whole world is too much. I can't deal with it. Leave me alone. So state drives story, And whenever we're immersed or enmeshed in our state story from a defensive state, we're locked in the story. We're not really in contact with ourselves as we are. We're not in contact with the world as it is. We're only in contact with us and the world through the lens, the limited lens of that state. So, for example, if I'm in shame, I just only see crap in me. If I'm in anger, I only see wrong in you. And if I'm in fear, I don't feel strong enough to protect myself by fighting. I have to get out of here. I have to go. I have to leave. It's too much. So I think, again, both of our questions today are pointing towards this larger field of both understanding and a sense of what we can do once we begin to see things through this perspective.
I want to take a moment and just thank our callers for their beautiful and vulnerable and heartfelt questions today, as well as all the questions we've received from people. And it always amazes me how an individual's question about their specific journey can so quickly become applicable to all the things we're experiencing. Just resonate and see that over and over again. So, Jeffrey, maybe you could tell people how they can send their question.
Sure. If you'd like to send a question and we listen to everyone, call 866-357-5156. That's 866-357-5156. Or if you can't reach that number from an international phone, send an audio recording or just a plain email to hello@drjeffreyrutstein.com. I'm also excited to tell you that my flagship program with Sounds True, the Healing Trauma Program, is open for enrollment. You can visit drjeffreyrutstein.com/links to learn more. And if you're on YouTube, subscribe. And if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, follow. And if you feel like it, leave a 5-star rating. Steve, thank you as always for being my partner and my fellow voyager in these explorations.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
And thank all of you for spending the time today. Hope to see you soon. Bye for now.